Good morning, friends, and welcome to the main object big book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. My name is David. Once again, a blessing to be here with all of you. And I am going to ask my friend Zach. Zach, would you be so kind as to read the preamble? I'm going to bring it up. Just actually one moment, please. I'll be right there. There we go. Let me bring it up on the screen so everybody can see it. All right, here we go. So, Zach, if you could be so kind and read that for us, please, I'd appreciate it.
Good morning, I'm Zach. I'm a cross-addicted alcoholic. AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you.
Zach, thank you so much for your service. Really appreciate it. And so, once again, if you've been here before, you know this, but I think there are some new folks on the call this morning, so I'll just touch base on this real quickly. We are a line by line big book study, and what we do is we break the text down into 5 categories, in addition to the other things we talk about. But the colors you see next to those categories, and the categories, of course, are questions, directions and explanations, promises, warnings, and history. The colors you see next to them are the highlighter colors I use. You can certainly choose your own. Our friend Rich, who I'm grateful for doing service and helping host this morning, he is going to post those in the chat, or he may have done so already. So as we go along, what I find is that when I break or I categorize the text into those 5 different units, what it does is it begins to unlock or decode the deeper power and message of the big book. And one of the things, and we're going to really focus on a little bit of that decoding today, because some things came up as I was looking at this text that really opened up the door to, for me, a new awareness, and I'm going to share it with all of you. And that what I find is that in unlocking or decoding the text of the big book, it comes to life for us in a whole new way, in a way that really, beyond just sort of analysis paralysis or any kind of theoretical college course. What it does is it shows us a clearer pathway toward that spiritual awakening that we need in order to stay away from a drink one day at a time, because that's ultimately what it is all about. It is about our relationship with our higher power. And so before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm consulting my notes and I see we should probably, speaking of the higher power, why don't you all, if you'd like, join me with reciting the Serenity Prayer? We'll invite God into the meeting today. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done. And our format today is I'm going to speak on the text for about 25 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for comments and discussion, questions and thoughts, and so forth. And also, I'd like everyone to know that the meeting is being recorded, although only we'll stop the recording when we get to the sharing and discussion portion of the meeting. So if anybody is queasy about having their voice recorded, that's not a problem. And what we do then is we post those on our YouTube channel, audio only, no video. And so if you want to go back or you want to invite somebody to listen in, that's an archive of all of our meetings. And so, as I said, we're on more about alcoholism. We are going to start with page 31 and hopefully make it over to 33. And just to step back for a second and kind of give a big picture overview is where we are in the book and what Bill has been doing so far. And as we've previously discussed last week with this chapter, more about alcoholism, we see that Bill is putting a powerful spotlight on AA's first step. And particularly the first part of that first step, which emphasizes admitting we were powerless over alcohol. Now, on the one hand, some of us may feel like this point, the fact that we're powerless over alcohol because we've had the doctor's opinion, we've had Bill's story, those two chapters have really driven home this fact that we are powerless over alcohol. But Bill seems to come back to it again. Now, why does he do that? And on the one hand, some of us may feel that this is redundant, and if you're going to have a text or tell a story, you should do one part after the next, right after the next, right after the next. However, when we look at the big book, we see a closer examination shows us that, yes, Bill is indeed, and especially with what we're going to read today, he's revisiting the key commitment we could talk about, which is, and we've talked about the 4 commitments before, but he's revisiting this notion of the medical facts and the twofold nature of our disease, that we have a allergy and a compulsion. But now he's doing it, we'll see, he's doing it in greater detail, and he's going to use identification and storytelling in order to take us into a deeper awareness of what it means to be powerless. Now, this pattern, and I'm just going to digress for a minute, but I think this is important, and I want to share something with everybody that really revealed itself to me as I was prepping for the text today. And this pattern where Bill comes back to a topic he mentioned earlier in the text, it illustrates what I'm calling the spiral design of the big book. So I hope you can see the little graphic there. And that may seem like, just random doodling, but I'm just going to take you through it really quickly, because when I realized this early this morning, so much more of the big book suddenly leapt to life for me. And that was, remember we had talked about the 4 commitments, and for those of you who may not have been here for that, the 4 commitments came out of looking at Bill's story and also comparing it to Dr. Bob's story and Dr. Bob's nightmare, and what we find is that in order for these 2 gentlemen to get sober, there were 4 commitments they really needed to adopt without reservation. And they were if you just kind of go counterclockwise with me, the medical facts, a high resolve, a spiritual design for living, and ego deflation. And when they had embraced or experienced thoroughly those four things, each of those gentlemen were able to stay sober. And I reflected on my own journey through sobriety, and I realized that my sobriety, even though I had put down a drink when I was quite young, my happiness or my contentment in AA and my ability to use AA as a real design for living did not begin until I had embraced these same four commitments. Now, back to what I mentioned a moment ago, and you can see the title there, The Big Book's Commitment Spiral. And what we see, remember, we're talking about the fact that what Bill does, he doesn't structure the Big Book like a traditional text, which is you start with part one, then you go to part two, then you go to part three, then you go to part four, and so on and so on. He doesn't do that. What we see is he comes back around again and again to certain key points. But I realized how he does it is in a spiral. And what he is doing is he is taking us into a deeper and deeper relationship or understanding with the four commitments. And so you might ask for a second, well, why is it a spiral and not just a circle? And the answer is it's not because I just wanted to be fancy. The key difference between a spiral and a circle is that when you go around a circle and you come back to, like, let's say medical facts, you're in pretty much the same position. If it's a circle, you're pretty much in the same position as to where you were last time. However, in a spiral, if we follow it, we're coming around to the same topic, but we're in a deeper place. Does that make sense? And why is it important for Bill that we go deeper and deeper and deeper? Because what Bill is trying to do is through the text, through this book, through this paper and ink, he is attempting to ignite in us the same kind of vital spiritual experience that he had in Towns Hospital and that Dr. Bob had with him 6 months later. And so we start out, for example, with the doctor's opinion, and it was important to me that medical facts be at the beginning, there at the top at the 12 o'clock position. Because remember what Dr. Silkworth told Dr. Bob. Bill, stop trying to educate them on the spiritual experience. Lead with the medical facts. And that's where we start with the doctor's opinion. We start with the medical facts. Even though what we see is that Dr. Silkworth even brings in the spiritual dimension. And so at any given point, Bill is emphasizing one of these four commitments, and maybe more than one of them. But we'll see, and this is not throughout the whole big book, but primarily for the first 7 chapters, because chapter 7 is working with others, which is step 12. And so this is the structure of the first 7 chapters. And suddenly when I realized this early this morning, suddenly it made sense and I understood what Bill was trying to do. So that said, and I'll post that graphic up there in the chat, and Actually, let me do that now before I get distracted with other things. And so, at least for those of you who wish to download it, you can. And I'll be right there. I am. Oh, there it is. Okay. For those of you on a computer, you will see the file. For those of you on a mobile device, you will not see the file I just posted. If you want to get that emailed to you, leave me a chat message, private chat message with your email, because I probably don't have it, and just let me know you want that graphic. So, anyway, back to the text, because let's return to today's text and see, as I mentioned earlier, how Bill uses both identification and storytelling to show us how our own problem solving strategies are useless in the face of this deadly affliction we have. So we're on page 31 in the middle of the page, and he's talking about here are some of the methods that we have tried. And of course, he means tried in order to stop drinking. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house. I'm going to just hit the pause button right there, because what we see here already is a variety of strategies and a variety of levels of commitment to sobriety. And what I mean by that is you see methods for managing our drinking while drinking, and you also see methods of limiting our drinking, and you also see methods of stopping drinking. They're all contained in this list. So, and some might dovetail into the other, but think about that. So it's not all just about, well, here's what we did to stop drinking, but here's what we did to respond to the problems we had while drinking. I think that's more to the point. So, moving on, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job. And that's actually straight out of Bill's biography, because he didn't lose a job, but he lost a critical deal that he was putting together, because he did make a commitment that if he picked up a drink, he was out of the deal. And he did pick up a drink, and he got thrown out. Anyway, moving on. Taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever with and without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums. Again, I'll hit the pause button, because that might seem like an old-timey thing that they perhaps did back in the 30s, health farms and sanitariums. Today, we would just call that going to rehab. That's what it meant, going to a drying out place. So it's not an old-timey thing, because it's still what we do today. Accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. And again, substitute the word rehab in there. We could increase the list ad infinitum. The key point I wanted to make here is one of the things I realized is he's making a case. He only mentions it like maybe twice in the whole chapter, because remember that spiral design. He's not really emphasizing in this chapter the spiritual design or spiritual solution. He mentions it, though. We'll come to that. But what he does focus on here are the medical facts. But the point I want to make is this was written in it was published in 1939. It was written in 1938. The fellowship was still new. The meeting attendance was still relatively low. And I'm mentioning that to say it was early in the days of AA where there weren't a whole lot of AA customs or patterns like we have today. So, what I would say, and I'm not saying that these things are necessarily bad, but if this were written today, Bill might include things that involve the strategies we use or have some of us use, like myself, when going to meetings, being court ordered to meetings. That was mine. And other things that we do while in Alcoholics Anonymous that are not focused on a spiritual solution. Does that make sense? Because everything is going towards a spiritual solution. So, I never mentioned also, I got a little ahead of myself, sorry. This entire paragraph, top to bottom, that we just read is pink for a warning. Some of you might have picked that up. Now, this next paragraph and the paragraph that follows on 31 are all green for explanation or description. We do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. There are, and we'll encounter this is we're about to see the first, quote unquote, alcoholic test. So maybe you're not sure. Maybe you're on the fence. Try this. And here's the first example he provides. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take long for you to decide if you are honest with yourself about it. It may be worth a bad case of the jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. Now that was really, for me, that was really instructive when I really read that for the first time and really absorbed what it meant there, because I had spent a lot of time when I first started sponsoring people basically trying to I wanted to keep them in the rooms more than they wanted to be in the room. And I wanted to convince them more than they wanted to be convinced that they were an alcoholic. And has anybody else done that, or is it just me? Okay. All right, good. So there's at least 3 of us. And Juliet, did you have a comment, or were you just agreeing?
I was just agreeing. Sorry.
Okay, well, good.
I should have been a thumb.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. But you can see that our big book advises a different strategy than trying to convince people. Remember, it says elsewhere in the book, John Barleycorn is our best advocate. Okay. I think this next paragraph on 32 is pretty instructive. Though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is still time. We have heard of a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period of time because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here is one, and that's all green for description. The thing that I want to point out is that Bill really does a great job here of getting inside the head of an alcoholic, even though he doesn't say that in the text. But what he's doing is he's just laid out all these things that we do to stop drinking, and then he provides an alcoholism quote-unquote test. And when I say Bill gets into the head of an alcoholic, Bill is well aware that many people are going to read that book, read those paragraphs, and say to themselves or say to somebody else, well, listen, I stopped for a month and I've stopped lots of times. So I don't have the problems they're describing here. And so what Bill then does is he goes right to the counter evidence, the evidence that disproves the alcoholic's argument or logic. And here is where he uses storytelling to really drive home powerlessness. A man of 30, and these first several sentences are green. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Okay, all of that is green. The next sentence, however, I put in pink as a warning. Once he started, he had no control whatever. And the reason I pointed that out is not just it's not just that it's a fact. It's that it goes back to, remember when we even talked about this last week. This notion or this term real alcoholic. And Bill actually provides us a definition of what a real alcoholic is. Well, having no control whatever over your drinking once you start is it's one of two parts of being a real alcoholic, but it's the key part that he talks about. So what Bill is saying is, okay, this guy is a real alcoholic. The next couple of sentences are in green for explanation. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man. He remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. So those sentences are green. The rest of the page is in pink for warning. Then he fell victim to the belief, which I find this interesting, practically every alcoholic has. What he's saying is that at one time or another, most of us who have been sober will have at least a fleeting thought that says that this long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. I call those things like text messages. I get text messages from my disease. Now, luckily, I don't, because of God's grace, I don't have to indulge those. But I think does anybody here, or is it just me? Does anybody here know, especially people with a few years, know people who have had multiple years, sometimes decades of sobriety, who then went out and drank? Okay, I see the hands. Good, good. So it's just not me. Okay, Juliet, see yours as well. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. What Bill is doing now is he's illustrating with a real life example the strategies he mentioned on the page before. Here are some of the methods we tried. Well, here's a story of those strategies in action. And basically, what Bill is saying is that this gentleman applied his own problem solving strategies to his alcohol problem. And the things, meaning the strategies that made him incredibly successful in every other area of his life, he applied those same strategies to his drinking problem. And here are the results. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. Every means of solving his problem, which money could buy, was at his disposal. Meaning, let's just hit the pause button again. Meaning, if this gentleman wished to fly to Europe, just like Roland Hazard did, and receive psychiatry from Dr. Jung, he could have done it. So no option was off the table for this gentleman. Now, here's the thing. He may have thought he didn't need to do that. He may have thought he had it under control.
I agree with you.
So, every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces and was dead within 4 years. I don't have the details with me at the moment, but this is not a hypothetical or a theoretical example. This is a real life example. So now I'll just comment one quick comment, and then we'll finish up the next paragraph and open it up. When I looked at this story, it's like, okay, but it just seems an anomaly. It's an extreme example, and somebody who stayed dry for 25 years and then dies in 4. But what I realized is I think it's likely that the man, this gentleman, had a higher power. It just wasn't God. His higher power was likely achievement and acquisition. And that higher power kept him sober for 25 years. However, remember what our book says, that unless we have a power greater than ourselves, we're not going to be able to navigate the certain low spots ahead. And this gentleman faced a low spot, which was probably he retired, so he no longer had his higher power, which was achievement. And he could not stay sober. He didn't have a spiritual solution. Moving on. The case contains a powerful lesson. That part is in green. And the next several sentences are in pink. Most of us have believed that if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. But here is a man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. Now, there were no scientific studies at this point talking about the progressive nature of the disease. But Bill knew this in 1939. That it's a progressive disease, that for every one of us here, myself included, I've been sober 34 years. If I picked up a drink in a short time, I would appear as a person who had been drinking for the last 34 years. Because the disease progresses even though we arrest it. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in short time as bad as ever. And he's really driving it home here, the medical facts. The rest of this, and we're going to finish up with the next sentence, which I have double highlighted. I have it both a warning in pink and an explanation in green. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. Now that's interesting because that flies in the face of some things we sometimes hear in meetings, which is I'm just sober for today. I might drink tomorrow. Now believe me, I'm not slamming anybody who, if that's what's keeping them sober, okay. However, what Bill's talking about is if we are going to be happy, joyous, and free, we need to get to the point where, and he uses another term elsewhere in the text, we are done for good and we intend to stick. So with that, I've gone over again, such a problem student, and but I'm going to open it up. So let's hear some thoughts and comments.